Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. It's not a beautiful Wednesday. It's raining, actually, but I am recording this in my lovely hometown just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, in my home office that has still yet to be decorated. If this is your first time listening, I want to welcome you, and I really hope that you enjoy today's interview. I think you will. If you're returning, I want to welcome you back, and I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please do me a big favor and just take 2 seconds and hit that subscribe button on either Apple or YouTube or just wherever you're listening to this interview so that you get notified every time I release a new episode. I have some really incredible guests coming up that are going to talk about, I've already done the interviews. I'm just waiting to release the episodes, and we deep dive into investing. They're brilliant people that have made millions of dollars in the stock market and in real estate and, many other things. And I just want to make sure that you're notified when we release those episodes because they're going to be very, very valuable with action steps that you can take right now to increase your net worth. And so I just want to let you guys know that. Today, I have a very incredible guest, and he's going to talk to you about how to build incredible relationships with your loved ones, the people around you, and the people that you want to meet. Bill O'Haron is a corporate executive, a therapist, and an author, and he spent 15 years counseling clients on how to better understand themselves and deepen their relationships. Bill teaches that all of our relationships started in the 4th grade when our limbic-emotional body learned, absorbed, and inherited our parents' lives, which is true, and experiences. We are all therefore married to our own old unconscious emotions. And his research shows that relationships fail for one single reason: a lack of understanding of one's own emotions and reaction patterns created in childhood. It's just a very powerful topic, and I'm excited for you guys to listen to this. In this episode, we dive into the mind, why and how we make many of our decisions when it comes to relationships, and some actions that you can take right now to form stronger and more authentic relationships with the people around you. Everything in life is relationships, guys. This is why I think this is a fantastic interview. Bill said some things that definitely blew my mind. So please sit back, take some notes, and enjoy the interview. Bill, welcome to the show. I appreciate having you on the podcast. I'm really excited to have you share some of the wisdom that took you a lifetime to acquire with our listeners today.
Thank you. I appreciate it, John. I'm really, like you, I've been looking forward to this conversation. As my wife says, I am incapable of small talk. So anything that has any pithiness to it, I'm excited about.
Definitely. Hey, well, first of all, I mean this, I really, truly love just interviewing people that have a deep understanding of like psychology, the subconscious mind, and just really like how that all relates and correlates to like improving like someone's life. And so that's why I'm so excited, because I listened to some of your other interviews, and for this interview, I was really hoping that we could tap into that vast knowledge of yours on how to improve your relationships, friendships, significant other primarily, and really just in general, because I feel like a lot of people need that right now. As you see the media, it seems like everybody's getting a divorce now. The people that we look up to, like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and
great point. You're right.
It's just about that. Yeah. And I see memes all over the place. It's just like, wow, if Bill Gates couldn't figure out how to make his wife happy with 120 billion, how am I supposed to do it? It's just like, it's funny.
It's a great point.
But just people today seem more disconnected than ever. They're so touchy on any topic right now. And my belief, honestly, Bill, is like, I don't believe that anybody intentionally wants to live this way. Right. Like, I don't think people want to be disconnected and have shitty relationships. And so, I find it interesting that you've spent about 10,000 hours helping your clients through this. And they say it takes 10,000 hours to master anything. And so pumped to get into it. But first, I just wanted to have you share a little bit about your story.
Sure.
And just how you ended up doing what you do right now, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As I was sharing before we hit record, I've been in the financial field. I'm still in the financial field. As I like to say, I've been in since Ronald Reagan was in office, his second term. In sales, in financial sales. And then I ran into what turned out to be a really phenomenal inflection point in my life at my early 30s, 31, 32. I was in the financial field, having really nice success. But there was something going on inside of me that I wasn't that happy. There was kind of this, it felt like there was an echo in my heart. There was something, and really it's going to lead into really what the thread of this conversation will be is I felt disconnected to myself. I felt like a part of me is like, am I living this life? Am I living the life my parents wanted, my grandparents wanted, or am I living something that was a little bit more authentic? And I don't really like that word authentic, so I apologize, but there was something aching. And one night I meditated and I started doing therapy, and 25 years later, I'm still following that spool. So financial field, I took a nice hiatus. I went back for a master's in social work in 2001, 2002, right after 9/11, as we were discussing. I got my license in counseling in 06, and then hung out my shingle. So 06, 07, I get back full-time in the financial field. People are like, Bill, licensed clinical social worker and sales. I'm like, you'd be shocked. It's very similar. It's all about developing relationship. It's all about professional vulnerability and trust and persistence. And then started a part-time practice, which I still have, which is evenings and weekends, counseling couples, suicidal teens. I run the gamut because I feel like every situation is really a relationship with self and understanding self. So here I am at 56, just in summary, been in the financial field with a nice little break in the middle. And I have to safely say, I feel like I'm a scientist researcher on relationships. This is really relationship with self.
Yeah.
I did finally write the book. I'm an English major. It took me, 10 plus years. I'm still like laughing at how long it took me to finish a book, but it came out last year. It's called Waking Up Marriage, Finding Truth in the Partnership. It's not about marriage. It's about how in every relationship, John, it's all a understanding of self. If you and I are in a relationship, which we've now started to develop one, you're going to kick up something in me. Something you're going to say or do is going to kick up, a joy, a sadness, a longing. I'm like, where's that from? How did John kick that up? And I could certainly point my finger and say, it's your fault. You shouldn't have done that, which we do with our boss and our grandmother and our parents. But in the end, and I just got goosebumps, that typically means we're on a good thread. It's all Bill understanding Bill. It's all me understanding me. It has really nothing. My relationship with you has almost nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with how am I responding to you? How am I reacting to you? Every relationship's 50-50. You own 50% of this. I own 50% of this. All I can do is my 100% of my 50. And let's say you and I are in a relationship and you're like, oh, Bill's not really a great guy. And you start to fade back away. All I can do is my 50, and the relationship can come back, but it only comes back if you and I are willing to be vulnerable with each other, share who we are, share how we're doing in the relationship, and then moves forward. So I have been studying relationships literally nonstop for 25 years now. And I'm certainly no expert, but I will say, having almost 9,000 hours of meditation and just kind of working with couples and working with clients, working in the counseling profession is really my way to learn and teach myself. Life is the true teacher. And so, I feel lucky, knock on wood, healthy, and just love these conversations. So thank you very much. For
Absolutely.
That was way too long. I apologize.
No, it's great. I especially like what you said just a minute ago, that relationships are 50-50, but all I can do is 100% of my 50. I think a lot of people get that mixed up, and we'll unpackage that in just a minute. But I wanted to start this with the big question, and then I'm hoping that we can dissect it pieces, starting with like your upbringing.
Yep.
But the big question is why do most relationships fail?
That's really the whole premise of the book. You nailed it. I mean, 3 hours later, we could still be on this topic. in my estimation, in my guess, there's one reason only. I don't understand me, and therefore the relationship, that thing, the altar, that fire relationship, I can't handle because I don't understand what I'm bringing to it. So I believe that all relationships fail for one single reason: lack of awareness of who I am, of who we actually are. Now, it doesn't mean, we can spend 25 years of being fully aware of ourselves and a relationship not working. All that is that there is a dynamic or a desire to carry the relationship forward. And so not knowing self to me is still the primary reason. But if I desire to have a relationship with someone else and they desire to have a relationship with me, if it still doesn't work, it means that I haven't reconciled what it is causing me to overreact and really kind of break the bond or break down the bond. But if two people have a desire to be in a relationship, which I think we'll probably touch, if you have the desire,
right?
What people often say is, well, I do have a desire. I do want to be with my husband. I do want to be with my spouse, whatever that is, but they're not willing to do the work on self, then it's almost impossible because all the work is on self. Check this out, John. Here's the definition of relationship. It comes from Latin, relatus. The word relationship comes from Latin, relatus. Relatus means to carry back. A relationship's a verb. It's not a thing. It's an action. You and I are in a relationship. You kick up some sadness and longing in me, whatever that means. I go back and I look at that inside myself. I take it to my cave. I take it to my therapy. I take it to my meditation. And I'm like, oh, John's kicking up my feeling of who I was in sixth grade. And that really makes me upset. And I carry that insight back. I carry that vulnerability back to you at the altar of our relationship. And you're like, oh, and then you take that, you're going to do with that whatever you're going to do with that new information. And if you're willing to go, hey, that's interesting, because in eighth grade, I felt blah, blah, blah. Now the relationship is moving forward in time and space at a deeper level. So a relationship is truly a verb of continually unwinding me, unwinding yourself, sharing that, and the relationship will have a natural organic movement if we're willing to be vulnerable, willing to share that stuff.
Ooh, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes, the vulnerability part. But
Big.
one of the things that I read in your bio was that there are 8, I think, unique relationships occurring at the same time.
Yeah.
I was really hoping, because I haven't read your book yet, but I was really hoping you could take a minute and expand on what you meant by that.
I really like this notion because I watched it in my own relationship, especially in the early days. And Carl Jung was the one of the greatest thinkers of all time.
Yep.
He came up with the term archetypes. Archetypes is simply, in every movie there's an evil villain. That's an archetype. There's a villainous body. It's a dragon. It's a witch. It's a ogring old man, whatever it is. And so an archetype is really an energy or a representation of something. And every human being has archetypes living inside of them. And so what I looked at is there's 4 major archetypes, there's 4 major forces, 4 major relationships within every human being. It's my relationship and your relationship to the feminine. So you have an understanding, you have a core understanding of how the feminine works. How did you learn that and acquire that? Through your relationship to your mother, or whoever the feminine was that raised you. And then conversely, we have a relationship with the paternal, with the masculine. Right. So already those are 2 archetypes that are living in me at any given moment. Maybe my boss, maybe you are going to kick up something in me that I react to the masculine energy with defensiveness or insecurity. Right. So now there's 2 archetypes. The third archetype in me and all of us is that I have some kind of understanding of how relationships work. So I have a relationship with my understanding of relationships. I have an experience, a sensibility around that thing called relationships. Where did I learn that? Watching my parents exist for the first 18 years of my life at home. And then the fourth is my understanding of myself. So I have a relationship with myself. I have a sensibility and experience around who is Bill. Does Bill really know what's going on inside of him? In the old days when a woman, dismissed me or act dismissively towards me, I would get really reactive. Now I'm like, oh, I see that. That's kind of, so there's 4 relationships, 4 archetypes going on inside of me at any given moment. My wife has the exact same 4. So at any given moment, we're having a discussion about like the oil running out in the car. She's angry at me for not doing it. I'm angry at, and so she's angry at the paternal energy in her, her archetype of the masculine energy. I'm mad at her because she's being dismissive of me. So then my relationship, my understanding of relationship, is getting woken up. So at any given moment, there's 8 like different bodies of relationship, different sensibilities being kicked up in both of us, 4 and 4. So that's where I came up with the understanding and looking at a single relationship with you with your wife or you with your boss or whatever it might be, that it's not just one dyad. There's a bunch of different things going on behind the scenes. When you pull the curtain back, you might be frustrated with your wife because watch this. My mom browbeat my dad my whole life. I'm very candid with that. Right. So I went and entered the adult world with an understanding of the feminine as browbeating the masculine. So a woman would say something to me when I was in my early 30s, and I would get really defensive, and I didn't realize why. I was carrying my archetype of my relationship with the feminine had some dents to it. And it's when I realized, like, wow, that wasn't my stuff. That was my parents' stuff, but I soaked it up. So that's kind of how I see that.
Yeah. God, it's so interesting because, and I want to talk for a minute on the childhood part because you're spot on. Like I own a preschool with 150 kids
that's like the great laboratory of
and they all come from different families. We have a lot of foster children. We have a lot of state supported children. We have divorced parents. And it's just crazy because so much of who we are is created, in those early years where we have the least awareness, we have the least control over who we become. And then you're stuck at 18 or whatever when you get this awareness and you're just like, how do I change? Yeah. Like, how did I get here? And how can I become who I want to become? Is there a process for that? Is there? And so it's just like, where does it start? Like, where does all this start?
Man, you're just coming up. You're like nailing the big questions.
Well, then for me, this is a therapy session. If you didn't know.
Ditto. So here's a powerful fact: the first 10 years of a human being's life, their physiological makeup is almost purely limbic, which means purely emotional. The rational part of our brain, the neocortex, which is the youngest part of the brain structure, the 3-part structure, which is about 2 million years old, our neocortex, whereas our reptilian and midbrain are millions and millions of years old, 100 million years old. So the first 10 years of a human being's life were pure emotional. 80% of what kids pick up at home is nonverbal those first 10 years. And so what's happening, the name of my book was originally going to be called The Space in Between. Why? Because you didn't soak up just your dad's hair color, eye color, physiology, body type. You soaked up his disposition, who he felt about himself, how he felt about the world. You soaked up his emotions. Our heart as a child is an antenna, literally an antenna. Your dad's heart and your heart basically mirror what neuron scientists call mirroring. You soak in your parents' life experiences, right? So 10, 11, 12, you come out of that purely limbic state and you get to your 14, 15, 16. What happens is the rational mind starts showing up. And all those early emotions, sensibilities, kind of dissipate. They don't dissipate. They're still alive in our limbic system, in the electrons, in our biomagnetic makeup of our heart and belly and midbrain. But the rational mind starts taking over. And by the time you get to your 20s, we're guided probably 70% rationally. Now here's the universal joke, craziness. We get to our 20s, we're living this rational life, right? You're doing your thing, you're in the service, you're working hard, and then what happens at 28, 29, there's a physiological shift in the brain makeup and developmentally human beings. What happens? The brain starts myelinating. At 28 and 29 and a half, the left brain and the right brain, our emotional body and our left brain body start merging. And that's when people start having these kind of early midlife crises. They call it the Saturn turn. It happened to me. You get to 30, 31, 32, you're like, what am I doing with my life? Because there's now this meaning and desires and longings that were in your childhood, not good or bad. They're just in there. What do? They start seeping up. I see it all the time. My if you looked at my schedule of who I'm counseling these days, is 31-year-olds, 32-year-olds, 33-year-olds who are just getting that sensibility to get kicked up. It feels like you kind of know what I'm saying. And so you asked a great question. We soak in it. Our rational mind kind of covers it for the early years into our 20s. We get to our 30s, and then we do one or two things. We avoid those emotional pangs, those desires, those search for meaning that are just naturally coming up. We avoid them or we address them. Well, when we address them, all kinds of emotions come up, memories come up. They all were stored in there. And so really,
wow,
the only way to truly address that which lives in our limbic system is we have to quiet the rational mind down, quiet the rational mind, and allow the memories to come up to speak to our rational adult self, your 38-year self, my 56-year-old self. Our adult self has this certain lens through which we look at the world, but the 14-year-old living inside of me, the 8-year-old living inside of me, those memories want to come up and talk to you, the 38-year-old. And that's done, right?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's like, number one, I've never, ever heard this before. And I'm telling you, Bill, I read a lot of books. I interview a lot of people. I've never heard this. And I'm not kidding, man. You were spot on. It was like right in my early 30s, I just got hit. And believe it or not, my last podcast episode, the one right before this, was a solo episode of me talking about investing and how I went through this midlife crisis and completely shifted everything. But I'm still going through it. Like of
course, it never ends.
Man, it's like, I've known that I have wanted, like, I've loved movies since I was a little kid. Like, it's been like the thing. And for a lot of reasons, I never like pursued that track. I pursued business instead. And it's just like, it's been eating over and over and over. And
that desire, right?
Yeah. And so I've hired a screenwriting coach, and every week on Thursday, he's helping me write that screenplay. And it's just like,
powerful.
This fulfillment is coming from that. But man, you're so spot on when you say that I just never heard that they merge in your 30s. That's why we go through this early midlife crisis. And I want to transition that obviously into like really, because I think we're getting into like, oh, how can I change my life? But so for so many of us, by the time we get there into our 30s or 20s, man, our habits, our way of life is so ingrained. It's so habitual. Like, it's not just, it's not just something you wake up and you say, well, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to do it differently forever. I mean, maybe 3 people out of 1 million could do that. I heard Hugh Hefner did that one day, but like, what do you do?
The first thing, your desire to screenplay and stuff is the perfect example. If there is a desire, if there is a need, a want to make a shift, that's the first and most important thing that's needed. People say, yeah, I really want to do it. Like, okay, here's the true test. Are you willing to, for instance, make an appointment with a therapist? Yeah, I can do that, right? Are you willing to sit quietly? Blaise Pascal said this in 1642. He has a theorem named after him, a triangle, and a coefficient. He's one of the smartest human beings on the planet. 1642, he said this: all of man's problem, all of humanity's problems is people are unwilling to sit quietly in a room by themselves. Is the 35-year-old, is the 31-year-old, I said it to every one of my counseling clients, every one of my friends, like, oh God, here goes Bill, he's going to talk about meditation. The only way, if you have the desire to shift, is you got to get the memories to come up. How to do it? Right. You quiet the mind, you straighten your back, and you listen to your heart. And it's a money back guarantee, John, that at some point, if you do that 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, I could give you examples, hundreds of examples of people I've said, just sit. Bill, there's got to be just start with sitting. And one of these days, your tears going to form in your eye. And the tears, those memories coming up, again, not good or bad. We don't judge them. They come up, and that's how you begin. A desire and a willingness to sit still in a room long enough for your inner thing, whatever you want to call it, Yahweh, soul, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It's going to come up and it's going to present. And it's going to present to who? It's going to present to your 38-year-old self. It's going to present to my 31-year-old self 25 years ago. And when it does, you're like, holy cow. And it's a guarantee. It will. It might take a year, might take 5 years. but it's a commitment. It's amazing what we're willing to do. We're commit to our golf game. We're willing to commit to, going out to good restaurants and drinking good wine. It's all beautiful. But are we willing to commit to finishing our life strongly? And how do we finish our life strongly? Robert Monroe studied it for 50 years. He says the only reason why human beings come back on earth is to take everything from our non-physical self, our emotional self, our desire world, and put it into the physical world. That's the creative act of being human. And how do I know what my desire world is? How do you know? You sit and you're like, oh my God, ever since 10th grade, I've wanted to write movies. Bingo, you're doing it. It's soaked in and it's come up, and now you're putting into action. And so we have to know what's living in our emotional self. And we do that by sitting quietly, letting that content come up. Now we place it into the outer world.
Man, I should have changed this interview from relationships to how to live a fulfilling life.
Well, I'm still working on it. So I'll let you know. Jury's still out if I finish up, but
absolutely. And now this brings me to me personally, like the most important point that I really wanted to cover on this, because I know all of the guys and even a lot of the women listening to this, this is going to resonate with them. And I was watching one of your other interviews, and you mentioned something that really struck a chord with me personally. You said that the only way to strengthen a relationship is with vulnerability. And so, and this is why I've got to talk about this, or have you share a little bit about this, because I had a mentor a long time ago. I used to do a lot of public speaking. I was in marketing, so I used to speak on the stage to entrepreneurs, and I loved it. And I had a mentor came up to me, somebody that I really looked up to, and he said this to me, and he was just like, you're a great speaker, and and he's like, the one thing that is holding you back from being great, and the one thing that will continue to hold you back, is your inability to be vulnerable.
Wow.
And that's a big issue for me. And it's just because, I grew up really poor. And so I have always saw vulnerability as a weakness. Right. And so how do you overcome that when you have like a problem solver mentality and you look at vulnerability as like, you just like being weak? Like, how do you coach people to get over that?
Boy, John, you just keep throwing just right down the middle the most important question. It's the hardest question. It's the hardest thing to do. It's there's no easy solution. But what I'll tell you is that the only way to really dance with vulnerability, understand vulnerability, is sit. We of course we're not going to do it right now. But if I did a 10-minute session with you, we would close your eyes and we'd go back to 4th grade. Or we'd go back to 3rd grade, we'd go back to 5th grade. And you, the 38-year-old, would spend some time with your 4th grader and 5th grader. And you in 4th grade, anybody in 4th grade, me in 5th grade, there's that sensibility and that wonderment and nervousness and fear and joy and everything and longing in that 4th grade self that truly is vulnerable, right? As a young kid, we don't even realize how vulnerable we are. But vulnerability really is the ability to allow every emotion, every longing, every fear to just come up. And when we do it by ourselves, here's the most powerful thing. That's why, as the Buddha says, the more and more you sit quietly, John, and just open yourself up, a butterfly is going to land on a flower. I know this sounds so new agey, but it's so beautiful and so precious that you're going to shed a tear. The Native American, you can look this up, the Native American, all the ancient tribal cultures had a ceremony called lamenting. And the native elders would get around and they would chant and they would weep. They would weep for what? Lamenting is just this understanding of how precious life is. And one of these days, sooner than you think, because you're asking the great questions, you're going to be sitting quietly in your meditative state. You're going to start doing it, and you're just going to break down in tears. You're like, oh my God, this is so weird. I don't really want to cry. But that crying is just opening up. And the tears we shed from crying are different than the tears we shed from a windy day. They actually have chemicals and hormones in them that are relaxant. So vulnerability is the body's physiological, biological response to any kind of stress, any kind of resistance. Vulnerability is like, oh, okay, I was really nervous about X, Y, Z, and now I'm opening up to that, and I'm shedding the tear and mourning for that fear that I've had. And then on the other side of this is like this energy that you've never felt before, and this joy that you've never felt before. But it's a funky path. And so how do you do it? you make a commitment to letting your heart express everything that it's ever felt. Every ounce of fear and every ounce of sadness. We would go back to when you were a child, and the 38-year-old would spend some time with the fourth grader, and the fourth grader would tell the 38-year-old all the things he fears and all he doesn't want. And you, the 38-year-old, hold space, and a tear, I guarantee a tear would start, turning in the corners of your eyes, and be like, oh my God, that's when it all begins.
That's crazy. I mean, I don't even know why I do it. Like, I will be watching a movie with my wife.
I know exactly where you're going.
I'm the person that, like, and I'm an emotional person. Like, I really am. Like, I feel bad for people, and I'm empathetic. But like, I'll watch a movie and I'll like sneeze and just wipe my eye. Like, I don't know why the fuck I do that. Like, I really do.
I'm the crier in my family. I have 4 girls, right? My 3 girls and my wife. I'm the crier. I'm always crying. Commercial, dog commercial. It's because your heart is open. That's why you're great at what you do, because you understand the world around you, because your heart, our emotions are the true teachers. Our emotions have this intelligence. Our brain. So think about this. Our heart has 40,000 brain neurons. Your heart sends 5,000 more signals to your brain than your brain sends you. We think our brain is this great beacon of intelligence. It's a storer of intelligence, but the heart and belly, are the true sources of intuition, knowledge that we all overlook. It's the heart that stores this. Your heart remembers everything that's ever happened to you. And in those emotions is knowledge about who you are, what you want, your life. And our brain is really, all the scientists say our brain's an echo of everything that's kind of coming up from the limbic system into the midbrain, into the top of the head. A different topic. But the powerful thing is your heart holds all the wisdom to your life. And when you open it up, that's where the tears come from. And the more and more you do that, in other words, watching a movie, a tear comes and then we shut it down, right? Our rational mind goes, oh, I got to get back. I got to get my another beer, some more food, and we shut it down. Imagine taking that emotion into your cave, into your meditation spot, into your sacred spot, wherever that might be, and being in that until the river opens, until it really opens up, right? Your party is like, oh my God, do I really want to do that? That's going to be really uncomfortable. Well, bingo. Think about this. The universe is built on friction and destruction. The second law of thermodynamics. All things in the universe will be in a friction-based state until they reach some kind of equilibrium. And so everything, this universe was created through this massive explosion. And I think relationships are built on being broken. Vulnerability is the breaking down of this rational sense of self, getting to the other side of it. But something has to break. What is it? My sense of self. What has to break? Bill's lack of ability to address the fears that he soaked in his childhood. Once I started breaking into those, breaking down, destroying this kind of egoic sense of myself, destruction, fire. I say stand in the fire. That's the premise of the book. Stand in the fire of your own emotions. Forget about your wife. Forget about your boss. They kicked all this stuff up. Stand in that fire. Let it burn you down. When I say burn you down, get on the ground and just cathartic. Like, I have these conversations often. I'm tearing up as I'm speaking because I have such a high conviction around the power of our emotions. And I know that sounds like all new agey, but our emotions wisdom.
Not at all. I've got to read your book. I think everybody listening needs to pick up your book, and we're going to have you share where to get that book as soon as we're done here. I've got a couple more questions, just because when I thought about putting this interview together, I look at a lot of relationships. And when I was in the Navy, I've always been fascinated by relationships. And it started when I was in the military, because when I got to the ship, there was this crazy statistic going around that when you go on a deployment for 6 months, 60% of marriages end while you're on deployment. And so I was just like, why? And I mean, I kind of understood it, right? Like, you're gone for 6 months, you're away from that person, you develop feelings, or they develop, it's just like the distance. But I just became intensely interested. And then years later, I started following a lot of like Tony Robbins' book. I read Awaken the Giant Within. I love that book. Good. And just started. And so I want to have you expand on something, because he talks about in that book, the 6 human needs. And one of them is the need for certainty, and the other one is the need for variety. And I
Mm,
see in so many people those two needs like conflicting in people. It's
yep.
like they don't want to lose what they have in a relationship, but there's that other need pulling at them for variety,
Variety.
for
Yeah.
something new. Like does it go back to self again, working on self, your awareness? Like, can you just
You
talk
just
about
answered the
this?
question. Yeah, yeah. No, but
Okay.
it's a great. I forgot about those. Those. I remember I read that book many many moons ago. Let's go to certainty,
Okay.
for example. All so the person that taught me meditation 25 years ago said this to me literally before I entered the space to get on the cushion. She said to me, Bill, you got to remember that Western thought, Western belief, kind of Occidental, kind of where we're at right here, is based on I need to know. It's a very
Mm,
rationalized um, um, approach, very kind of scientific. I need to know what my life's going to be. John needs to know how tomorrow's market's going to work. So what Eastern thought, the beginning thought leaders, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Confucian, they're all based on I don't know. I don't know. The tree. Let's look at the tree for a second. The tree's doing its best thing. It's being a tree, right? But it doesn't know if it's going to get wiped out by a storm tomorrow. And guess what? It's not worried about getting wiped out by a storm. Whereas you and I are worried about all this uncertainty. We're
yep.
worried about the pandemic. We're worried about politics. We're worried about all these things, which actually don't exist. Tomorrow doesn't exist. And so certainty is to me a it's a cloud of smoke that once
Yeah.
you see it, it looks real, and you blow on it, it dissipates. So just in relating it to the ship and it not working, I think a lot of that's probably also having to do with younger people in kind of in
Yep.
their 20s. They
That's
don't
right.
really know self. I mean, how well did you and I know each other when we were 25? Imagine us
Not
having a
at all.
conversation at 25. We'd be talking about the Giants, and cute girls, and that beer was really
That's
yummy.
right. That's
No
right.
offense, but kids are much more mature these days. But the point is, certainty, I think, is something that the only thing that we can be certain about is here's the great thing. What is the one thing in the life we can control? What's the one thing in your life, John, that you can control? Because there's only one.
How we react.
Bingo. How you feel, which generates how you react. One thing. What's the one thing nobody works on? How they feel. What's going on inside of them? What were they feeling as a child? What's the fourth grader inside? What are their desires, right? All
Yeah.
these things. So we're out poking the world, grabbing for things, grabbing for men and women to make Bill feel full. Make me feel full, make me feel whole, make me feel secure. It's smoke.
Yep.
It takes work to have certainty. Is in this moment right now, here's one thing I'm incredibly certain about, and I'm about to tear up by saying it. I feel good. I really enjoy talking to you. I'm in a moment right now that's beautiful. I can't figure out tomorrow, this afternoon, uncertain.
Yep.
And so
That's right.
spending time by yourself in your reactive, emotional, feeling body self is the only thing we can kind of fully get our arms and hands around. Now,
Mm.
maybe your listeners like, that sounds too new age. Of course, you have to have, you have to have a house, you have to have food, you have to have a job, you have to be able to fill out spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. Those are things that are certain and you can touch. But in terms of going forward in time,
Yeah.
focus on how you feel, what your desires are, and understand them. And then every time you act or react to somebody, it's going to be based on a knowledge of what's really going on inside you. Variety. Variety is it's a powerful set of it's a lens to look through. What do I love in variety? I love different shirts. I love different foods. But when it comes to our core relational interactions,
Mm-hmm.
we want people that are good for us, that support us, that understand us. There's no variety.
Yeah.
There's variety in the people, but there's a core interaction, there's a core dynamic, there's a core energy set that for me, I'm not willing to deviate from that.
That's right.
And early on, I knew that my life was better with my wife in it. Just using this core example, my life was better. I realized this. We've been married 24 years. I realized this within 2 or 3 years. I'm like, you know what? No matter what happens, whether she drops me like a hot rock, my life's better with her in it. So I'm going
Yeah.
to work my ass off to keep no variety in who I want because no one else was going to satisfy it. And then all the variety I was going to get was in everything else we did in our lives, what we did, our travel, our kids, creating. So for me, variety is not an ingredient in core relational kind of development and sensibility in a human being's life. Different people, but it's got the same core. And for me, my wife embodies everything that I want and need from the feminine energy. Period. That's it.
That's all, man. My wife's going to love listening to this interview. I have just a couple more questions. And my next question is just, obviously at this point, you've done tremendous amount of work on yourself and with others. Knowing what you know now, if you were to get into a new relationship with someone, let's just say you're starting over, you're dating, you get into a relationship with someone, what are a couple of the things that you would do at the very beginning, or a couple of things that you would think about that would set yourself up for a strong and healthy relationship?
That's what a great question. In fact,
thank you.
I was counseling a young woman, 32-year-old yesterday, who's getting out of another serious relationship. And she's like, Bill, what should I do? So it's ironic that you're asking right now. And I said to her, and this is what I would do, is from day one, first interaction, share how you feel right there. Hey, I'm first interaction. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm nervous because I've had I guess just because I'm now older in my mid 50s, I don't want to waste any time. I don't want to waste any I don't want any big emotional drip. Like if I don't fully reveal to you, whatever it is, or that person I'm building, like, why wait? And here's the power of vulnerability. If I haven't kind of soaked in my own sadness, longing, joy, I'm going to be hesitant to share it. But my conviction around my vulnerability and what I'm really good at and what I'm really terrible at, I would share day one. Like, hey, I'm not good at follow-up sometimes. I really need my cave time, my man time. So there's going to be, I might ghost you for a day or two. I'm just going to be brutally honest. Here's Bill. Bam, right there. And that, in a beautiful way, that might scare the heck out of whoever that person is. And so we know. And so, and probably a lot of your listeners like, I'm not ready to share that because I really want that relationship to work, or I just started one and we're 2 dates in. I'm afraid of being honest, because what happens if he or she's not willing to kind of take that? Then it goes back to the thing of, is that somebody who's not willing to be vulnerable? Because you and I know, John, now that vulnerability really is the key to relationship and growth in a relationship. So I would just be candid as the Dickens, and I'm not saying that might not be for everybody, but once you get into your early 30s, mid 30s, our brains have millenniated. It's like, just lay it out. Get real,
100%. It's like the older you get, the more you realize it's like, wow, why did I play these stupid games for months? Like, why? It's like, it's just, I don't know. Maybe that's just the period of life.
Well, we have to. I think we have to play the games because we have to. Life's the great teacher. And if we knew all this at 25, what would be left to learn in a way, right? But
absolutely. Yeah. Well, man, Bill, I can't tell you how much I love this interview. I'm not kidding you. Probably one of the best interviews I've ever done. And for everybody listening,
wow,
that's gonna want to follow your content.
So you're gonna make me tear up again.
Being vulnerable. Where can people follow your work? Where can people get your book? How can they connect with you? Like, where can they follow Bill? Because I'm serious. A lot of people are going to get a few aha moments in this interview. I got several. So like, where can people get more of that?
Thank you. Bless you, man. Great. Good man. First place is wholecounseling.com. So instead of Whole Foods, Whole Counseling, it's just my website. There's a lot of data in there, a lot of information. I think some of it's pretty good. It's got to be cleaned up, but that's the best way to start. My email, my phone number is there. And then the book, here comes the plug, the classic plug. You can find it anywhere, Amazon.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect.
It's out there. Yep. Called Waking Up Marriage, Finding Truth in Your Relationship. It's really it's an account of my life. I kind of throw some fictional characters in there, but mostly it starts from, that first time meditating, and the challenges. And I use the relationship, my marriage, as the template of how we work on self. But you could replace Waking Up Marriage with waking up your relationship with your boss, waking up your relationship with your grandmother, waking up relationship is really what the name of the book should have been. For some reason we went with waking up marriage, but because it kind of caught a certain genre.
Yeah.
But it really is pretty much outlines the 8 relationships: stand in the fire, second law of thermodynamics, relatus, all the stuff we talked about. So, it's got some good stuff in there. I probably could have honed it down a little bit more, but it was so nice to finish it. God,
yeah, definitely.
So nice to finish it, So,
that's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bill, it was absolute pleasure. I hope I can have you back on the podcast again to share something else.
Anytime.
But thank you again for sharing what you shared with the audience today. And man, I just really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.